All right, so a little bit about credit cards, which you probably are familiar with, but just to get to the nitty gritty of some of like what the statements are going to look like. So if you'd like to look at a specific example of a credit card statement, you can click this link here. But I'll give you like some quick examples as we go through the next set. Okay, so credit cards and debit cards. So the main difference between credit cards is credit, it allows you to borrow money, right? So it allows you to borrow money. Okay, so potentially like you're spending money you don't have, right? Not necessarily. Sometimes people use them as debit cards, but you have the opportunity to spend like up to whatever they offer you, right? So you could potentially spend money you don't have. And you're borrowing this money from a bank or a lender, right, to make purchases. You generally pay off, so you pay off credit cards once a month. So like, let's say I don't get paid until Friday and I have $2 in my checking account, right? But once I get paid, I'll have more, right? But I say, oh, but I really want Chipotle for lunch. Well, I can use my credit card to buy Chipotle so that I can then pay that off when my bill is due after I've been paid. Okay, so it's great, right? It's great to have, but you can get into trouble because you could borrow money that you don't have, right? Debit cards, though, are different because with a debit card, it's directly linked to your bank account. So directly linked to bank account. It's directly linked to your bank account, so the money is immediately taken out of your account. Money immediately taken from account. So you literally can only spend what you have. So a credit card could affect your credit score, whereas a debit card, it's just like a checkbook, right? It's just saying like, okay, what do I have in my account? I'm spending it. It's not going to affect your credit score the same way, okay? So you must have money in your account here, whereas credit cards, you don't. You can borrow that money and pay it back at a later date. So when you apply for a credit card, based on your credit score and based on how credible you are, they're going to offer you a credit limit. So if you're a brand new first-time credit card user, they're going to start you with a lower limit, like maybe $1,500, right? As you build up your credit, you can call the credit card company and say, hey, I would like to up my limit. Or as you build higher credit, they'll just automatically offer you a higher limit, which is nice if you like own your own business and you need to buy a set of supplies, or you I don't know, you want to build up points to get rewards, right? And you want to put things on your credit card. It's nice to have a high balance, but you need to make sure you can actually, like, you're good for that money and you can actually pay it off. Otherwise, you're going to get into debt real quick. So a credit limit, it is the total amount you can charge. So the total amount you can charge. And it is established based on credit score, and it is set up by the lender. So you can't just say, I want a $5,000 credit limit, right? Like that is something that the bank will establish for you, and then you have to make sure that you abide by that. A finance charge. Okay, so this is your annual percentage rate APR. So let's say I want to use my credit card just like a debit card, right? Like I want to just go to the store and I want to go to Target, buy my groceries, spend $100, boop, that bill comes through, I pay off the full balance, cool. It works just like a debit card in that sense, right? I don't have any finance charge, so I don't have, this is a fee, right? And it's a percent-based fee. Okay, but if I make my whole balance, if I pay everything off just like I would with a debit card, I don't have this fee at all. The only time this fee kicks in is if I have not paid off my entire balance. So if I have $200 due at the end of March and I don't pay off that full $200, I'm going to be charged interest. I'm going to be charged this annual percent rate, APR, based on what I have left over, based on that balance, okay? This APR is a percentage that is set up by the bank. Let's just walk through some of these definitions. So it is a fee for borrowing money. And not paying in full. Okay, so one quick thing here. Note that it's fixed, so it works a little different than growth and decay. It is exponential growth and decay, but we're actually not going to be creating those models like I mentioned earlier. We're just going to be thinking about percent, sort of zooming in here and looking at it month by month so that you could really better understand a credit card statement. Okay, but it is exponential growth, just so you are aware of that. And it would be that monthly growth, so it's that compounded monthly situation. But because it's a fixed rate, it's going to operate a little bit differently. So an APR, annual percent rate, it is the interest. So that's your percent, right? An interest rate charged on unpaid balances. So unpaid being key here, right? Not paying your balance in full. The monthly interest rate, so monthly is important, right? Because that would be 12 times. The monthly interest rate is your APR percent divided by 12. So that's exactly what we've been looking at before. So you split that rate into those 12 payments, right? Or another keyword would be like compounded monthly. Credit cards usually have higher interest rates than mortgages or home loans, right? So if you looked at the example, the one we did earlier with clients A, B, and C, like notice that these interest rates were 4%, 5%, and 6%. Because it's just a massive amount of money. It's different for credit cards. It's usually for smaller amounts, and you can accrue a ton of interest really quickly. They're usually in the 20% range for your interest here, okay? So the penalty APR. So this is an additional fee. So that's going to be your APR plus additional percent. So if you make a late payment or exceed your credit limit, if you max out that credit card, your interest rate may be increased. And you'll be able to find that information when you sign your contract for your credit card. You'll be able to see what information that is, right? So not only could they charge you a fee, and not only will you get charged your percent interest, your automatic APR, you'll also potentially get an increased percent rate, which is huge, right? That's not just a one-time fee. That's like, okay, now you weren't paying your bill at 15%. We're going to bump that up to 25%. The principal is what we've been talking about before. It's just your initial amount, right? So the initial amount borrowed. But we know over time that initial amount borrowed gets less and less and less, right? So you could also say your remaining balance. So it's that initial amount borrowed or your remaining balance. So like every time I make a payment, my principal is then going to become that new value after I've made that payment. Okay, fees. So most credit cards charge additional fees for cash advances. So you can sort of think of that as like cash back, right? But with a debit card, there's no fee because it's money coming from your account. But if I need to use my credit card to get cash, the bank is loaning me that cash. There's usually a huge percent charge on that. Balance transfers, if I want to move one balance to another credit card, there's usually a fee for that. Late payments. This is a huge one because it's super easy to do. Just miss a payment. Returned payment. So if you want to pay your credit card with your checking account and that check bounces, that's going to return it. Exceeding your credit limit. So spending more than you've been allotted. And sometimes an annual fee. So sometimes credit cards that have really great perks, like really great travel points, really great cash back incentives, or really great points back, then that will be an annual fee that you might have to pay for that credit card. And then your grace period, the number of days, generally between 20 and 30 days, you have before your interest accrues. So that grace period just means like I get an email on my phone that says your Chase credit card statement is ready, right? So I get that email and then I'm like, okay, cool. I look at it and then I'm like, oh, I don't need to pay this for 20 days, right? My payment is due on the 14th, right? So they release your statement and then you have that grace period to make your payment. You can make that payment anytime in that window as long as it is by that due date. And if you pay it in full, you won't have interest. If you make the minimum payment, then you'll just be accruing interest. You won't get the penalty, but you will be having to pay interest on top of that. So typically you're not charged interest until the grace period is up. Okay, cool. Please feel free to reference these notes at any time. It's a lot of terms, things you've probably heard before, but it all is sort of new. But as we work through the challenge, it's going to make a little bit more sense. Okay, so working on this challenge, I'm going to make another video. So if you will turn to page 4, you can click on the video at the top to see an overview of the challenge.